Tacoma Park, Maryland native Wes Moore was sworn in on Wednesday, January 18th, as Maryland's 63rd governor. Governor Moore is only the third African-American elected to the position of governor in the history of the United States. That such an accomplishment would be recognized during the same week that civil rights icon Reverend Martin Luther King is honored is an achievement for all Marylanders and for all Americans. Also sworn in on Wednesday as Lieutenant Governor was Aruna Miller, the first woman and Asian American to hold that august office. Maricé, what is the most significant aspect of Mr. Moore being sworn in?
Well, we are celebrating Wes's, obviously, inauguration. He is one of only 3 Black governors in the whole nation. And we saw kind of, just a slew of some famous people come through. Oprah introduced him. And what I thought was really heartwarming from his speech was really kind of addressing, the fact that our country is still a place where your parents can immigrate and you can become the next governor. And so he highlighted both his mother and also Aruna's mother, Wes's mother being from Jamaica and Aruna's mother being from India. So it was really a wonderful swearing in ceremony. And I thought it really gave a lot of hope on the bipartisanship as well that he's bringing back to Annapolis.
Well, thank you. Mark, Governor Moore comes into office with some very high expectations. I mean, my goodness, Bloomberg News has been touting him as a future presidential contender even before he was sworn in. That is a very, very high bar to clear.
Well, that certainly does raise expectations. And with all respect to the new governor, Maryland's a tough state to run for president from. Obviously, ask President O'Malley and President Delaney. Maybe it's the curse of Spiro Agnew. Look, I think he appropriately will be focusing on being the best governor he can during the next couple of years and let the future take care of itself.
Well, there's certainly an article by Colbert King in today's Washington Post that says, now that you have been sworn in, it's time to govern. It'll be a big test. Right. So Maricé, following up on that, in Governor Moore's acceptance speech that followed, it followed his theme from his campaign, particularly in how he wants to diminish the existing 8-to-1 racial wealth gap. There's no specifics. How do you think he's going to try to achieve that?
So he's talked about the unfair appraisals of, properties in historically redlined neighborhoods. So he wants to address that. We know that, home ownership is the best way to create generational wealth. He also has talked about accelerating the minimum wage. It's set to be up to $15 in the state of Maryland by 2025. His plan is to make that, come about sooner. It's also my understanding that he's going to be focusing on entrepreneurial incentives, but also within the school system, preparing our students, our future workforce to not only be employees, but to become employers and entrepreneurs themselves, focusing on, and some of the funding may come from, different sources, but focusing on minority and women-owned businesses as well as veterans-owned businesses. So I think he has, a pretty robust plan there, and I think he's going to be well supported by the General Assembly.
Well, we certainly hope so. Mark, I want to switch gears away from economics for a moment. The governor also envisions changes in the criminal justice system, which, according to Governor Moore, incarcerates more Black boys than any other state in the country, and trying to make Maryland safe, but also a just state.
Well, and I think his numbers were off in terms of the incarceration rate. There are other states, I think Wisconsin was pointed out as being one that was higher. Listen, this is a very important public policy area, criminal justice in Maryland. I was concerned about the starting point for that. I would start by focusing on the victims. And I appreciate that those who get arrested are victims of sorts, but we have an extraordinary murder rate in Baltimore that needs to get reversed. And there are concrete ideas that involve making sure that people who commit crimes with guns, and the laws are on the books, are appropriately prosecuted when they commit crimes. Maryland Public Policy did some great research that tracked people who had been arrested by homicide, what their history was, and had they been fully prosecuted for their prior crimes with guns and violent crimes, they wouldn't have been on the street, and hopefully those those murders would not have taken place. So we've got a lot of work to do in improving that criminal justice system in Maryland, but in Baltimore in particular.
Casey,
So-
if I could chime in just for
Yeah.
a second. So I would say that, and Wes has said this on the campaign trail. He said it when he's interviewed. I think he really gets it. It's really more of a three-prong approach. Understanding. I understand your issue with the incarceration rates, but there is a distinction between Black incarcerated folks versus boys. So what, and this is from my time when I was on judiciary, Maryland has the top numbers in terms of charging juveniles as adults and then being treated and incarcerated as adult Black men. And so then that is a distinction that dealing with the Wisconsin issue. But also, I think I think Wes does appreciate the issue around the low morale around law enforcement, and he definitely has a vision for that. He met with former Delegate Eric Barron that I served with, assistant attorney, obviously at the federal level, and then also with Attorney General Anthony Brown. So I think there are plans, and I sit on the committee for public safety. And then the other approach is really focusing on our youth, focusing on our students, making sure that young people are not on the streets without not anything to do, and inspiring the next generation of law enforcement officers that were, born and raised in the communities that they will serve. He also talked about a program immediately after high school to serve the state in the capacity of, it could be through, as a police officer, any, nurses, any of the paramedics. The whole point behind this initiative is to really inspire young people to serve the state of Maryland in the areas that we're really kind of lacking. And I would say that law enforcement morale is at the top of the list.
Well, we have to go to a quick exit question because we're running out of time for this segment. So, Mark, outgoing Governor Larry Hogan exits office with a 77% approval rating. Pretty nice. Anybody would like to have that. Will Governor Moore be as popular at the end of his term?
I certainly hope so for all our sakes. And I think it has to do with being governor that strikes a balance, a middle course that involves all Marylanders and frankly rejects the advice of the extremes on both sides.
And Maricé, your wrap up there.
I agree. I think, and he said it, that was really much the tone of his speech. And I thought it was a beautiful analogy to his time in Afghanistan. And he said, when I had to work with, I was a captain and I had my unit, I didn't care about what your political affiliation was. It's really the goal is to get the job done. And that is, doing it in a bipartisan manner.
I think that's what many Marylanders are hopeful and expect from our newly inaugurated governor. When we come back from this short break, Montgomery County residents are calling for more policing during their White Oak listening session last week. Stay tuned.